In the 1980s, and really for most of the 1970s, the Beach Boys had the unenviable goal of making records that evoked the magic of past hits that had been written and produced by Brian Wilson. This was no easy task, given that Brian was less involved during this time due to his mental health struggles, and when he was involved, he was not operating at the peak of his artistic abilities. Under those circumstances, the success of Kokomo is all the more impressive, given that it had no involvement from Brian whatsoever, although he did overdub vocals for the later Spanish language version. And yet, it still manages to evoke the nostalgic pop wizardry of Brian Wilson at his best, netting the group their first and final number one hit since the 1960s. All it took was 4 credited writers and the angelic vocals of Carl Wilson, delivering a hook for the ages. Let's talk about some of the musical qualities that make Kokomo a pop classic. Like the great Motown and Beach Boys records that came before it, Kokomo has several strong hooks. The opening chant is no exception to this rule. This melody is a classic combination of stable resolution, or resolving to a note from the tonic triad, in this case 1, 3, and 5 of the current key, C, G, and E here, alternating with the phrase ending on a tension, most commonly 2, 4, or 6, or D, F, and A here. We often find this in folk tunes, evoked here by the opening melody being presented a cappella. The first phrase encloses the tonic by coming up from 7 to 1, then going up to the 9th, before dipping back down to the 7th, and finally ending up back at 1. This gives our ear a sense of push and pull and anticipation, while still sounding gentle and soothing in a more ambiguous way than if the phrase began on 1. So instead of, we get do 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 do. The second phrase takes advantage of this by using the same melodic shape, but now it's based around the tension 4, or F here, being approached by step from the more stable 3 and 5 before finally ending back on 4. In melodic terms, ending on a tonal tension really makes us want to keep going so we can get to another phrase where we do end up on a stable tone. And then we go back down to 1. This opening melody is self-cycling, so it could hypothetically go on indefinitely, but the production is savvy enough to make sure that it never wears out its welcome. Kokomo's verses combine major and borrowed minor chords to create a descending chromatic inner harmony without sounding like the tune is modulating through different keys or is harmonically ambiguous. We hear this in the first 5 chords as we go from 1 to 1 major 7 to 5 7 minor, and especially wistful sound, to 4 to minor 4, a classic 60s rock substitution, back to 1, before finally turning around with a major 2-7 to 5-7 cadence to return to 1 again for the top of the next verse or chorus respectively. This creates an incredibly smooth, unbroken descent from 1, or C, at the top of the verse all the way down to 4, or F, on the final 5/7 chord. And really, it goes down to E or 3, because that 7th in the 5/7 will always want to resolve down to the 3rd of the tonic chord. The end result is a lovely blend of major and minor harmony that reinforces the song's themes of dreamy fantasy. As a side note, the major 2/7, 5/7 cadence is very Brian Wilson, both as a cadence heard regularly in Brian's own songs, and also is heard in the jazz standards and Disney songs that influenced Brian's distinctive writing style. Some pop songs have clear-cut intervals and interludes between verses and choruses. Others make use of overlapping melodies to propel the listener from one section to the next and avoid the feeling of resolution or rest. Kokomo favors the latter technique. For example, we expect to hear the opening Aruba Jamaica chant go on for 2 whole repetitions of the melody for 4 lines in total. This is balanced and symmetrical and typical of classic pop structure. However, Kokomo defies this by interrupting the 4th line, so that's 3, and then we get with a pickup to the verse, so we get that throws the listener off balance. It also leaves a gap in the first bar of the first verse melody that isn't there on subsequent verses. Another subtle trick that gives the later verses more momentum. So, that's only there the first times, not there the later times. After that, the end of every verse's melody resolving to 1 over the tonic chord, normally a point of rest, is overlapped by the onset of the chorus, itself an expanded, harmonized version of the opening vocal chant. Just like that. The chorus chant gets overlapped 3 lines later by Carl Wilson's solo. At the end of each chorus, the resolution to 1 over the tonic chord is, again, overlapped by the return of the a cappella vocal chant, only leaving the slightest gap before proceeding to the next verse or saxophone solo, respectively. So we have that, so down in Kokomo. Just like that. Finally, the last chorus uses the time-honored tradition of simply going straight into another repeat of the chorus as the song fades out. Classic ending, always leave them wanting more. The chorus could be a lesson on its own. The sweetest part of Kokomo comes from the aforementioned Carl Wilson solos during the chorus, and it's a testament to Carl's voice and singing abilities that his solos are delivered without additional backing vocals or harmonies. Some of the key techniques here are strong hooks on the downbeat, harmonic painting, melodic peaks, and the magic 6/5 suspension. First, the title hook. This isn't the first time we've heard Kokomo, but it is the first time we've heard it with the added energy of the chorus behind it. There's a full measure of lead-in before the solo lyric gets to Kokomo, but hook phrases are arguably most effective when they enter or conclude on the downbeat, and Kokomo is no exception. This functions differently than the end of Kokomo we hear at the end of the verses and choruses, which has its final mo syllable land on the and of beat 4, a position that typically hints at more to come. Placement of a lyrical hook is key. There's also the old Bob Seger wisdom, as conveyed by Glenn Frey. Find ways to repeat the title of your song as many times as possible. So to hear this in practice, we have Carl Wilson's first phrase after the pickup. So first one, down on beat 1. And then get there fast. Then the next one, downbeat again. And then the big hook, which we'll talk about later, the big target note. So there, all those phrases on the downbeat, very strong, and they convey energy in a way that's different than we've heard elsewhere in the piece when we hear the title Kokomo or when we hear the phrasing in general. Carl's solos also contain the melodic peak of each cycle, with the high A or 6 in our major scale on another strong downbeat on the word that's. Each verse and chorus builds to this payoff, with Mike's verses confined to the range of middle C and below, and the chorus lead vocals expanding up to the G or scale degree 5 above middle C. This makes each of Carl's "That's Where We Want to Go" lines a special moment that only comes around once a minute or so to highlight the dream metaphor of Kokomo, leaving the listener wanting more. The 6th scale degree also has a history of being used for emotional effect, as heard in songs like Bruno Mars' When I Was Your Man, and other songs that we'll discuss in future installments. Lastly, Carl's solo makes great use of prosody and what I call harmonic painting on the lyrics "Get there fast and take it slow," a classic example of tension and resolution. "Get there fast" is set to scale degrees 4, 3, and 2. Now, over the F chord of the harmony, this implies a major minor, or a minor major, and then a half diminished chord, with the dissonance subtly evoking the stress of travel. But then that same 2 resolves to a more stable 3 over "Take It Slow," conveying the relief and relaxation that comes from arriving at one's vacation destination. It's subtle, but effective. So we have "Get there fast," and then we "Take it slow." That wraps up our brief overview of Kokomo. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see y'all back here next time to discuss more of what makes your favorite songs tick. Take care of yourselves, take care of someone else, and have a good day.